Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that literally affects every single one of us, but often goes entirely unnoticed until the damage is already done. We are going to uncover exactly how chronic stress and its primary chemical messenger, cortisol, secretly damage the cardiovascular system. And we're focusing specifically on how this impacts adults over 50, because let's face it, our bodies handle stress very differently now than they did in our 20s. So let's jump right in. Here is our agenda for today. First, the stress hormone explained. Second, cortisol in the aging body. Third, the cardiovascular cascade. And finally, protecting your heart. Let's kick things off with a pretty crucial question to anchor our learning today. I want you to think about this for a second. Is that constant feeling of vigilance, that hum of anxiety from the news, work, or family pressures, is it actually causing physical wear and tear on your cardiovascular system as you get older? Well, the short answer is absolutely yes, but the how of it all is incredibly fascinating. Section 1. The stress hormone explained. Unmasking the suspect. Okay, so first up, cortisol. It's a steroid hormone, and it's produced right in your adrenal glands, which sit just on top of your kidneys. Now, I know cortisol gets a pretty bad rap these days, but it's actually absolutely essential for your survival. It manages your fight-or-flight response, it helps regulate your metabolism, and it controls your blood pressure. Under normal physiological conditions, a healthy adult produces about 8 to 30 milligrams of it a day. So cortisol is a vital hormone naturally released to help you survive immediate threats, like, say, swerving to avoid a car crash. But it becomes a massive health hazard when that alarm system never actually turns off. To really understand this, we need to look at the biological scene of the crime, the HPA axis. Think of this as the command center for your stress response. Look at how the flow works here. First, your brain perceives a threat, and the hypothalamus releases a messenger called CRH. This signals the pituitary gland just below it to release another messenger, ACTH. And finally, ACTH travels all the way down to the adrenal cortex, commanding it to pump out cortisol into your bloodstream. Once the threat is gone, the cortisol is supposed to send a negative feedback signal back up to the brain to turn the whole system off. But what happens when the threat doesn't go away? Section 2. Cortisol in the aging body. The chronological shift. You see, there's a massive contrast between acute and chronic stress, especially as we age. In our youth, stress is almost always acute, right? We study for a test, we run a race, the stress peaks, and then boom, it's easily metabolized and cleared from the system. But as we navigate midlife and cross that 50-year mark, stress often becomes chronic. It turns into this constant state of destructive vigilance. The danger never actually arrives, but your body, it's bracing for it 24/7. And this prolonged elevation leads to severe metabolic disruption, basically because the body's feedback loop just stops working effectively. So, for those of us over 50, what does this prolonged HPA axis dysregulation actually look like? Well, it manifests in a few very specific physical ways. You might notice you're forgetting things, feeling severe fatigue, or dealing with unexplained muscle stiffness, especially in your jaw or neck. But biologically, the really dangerous signs are happening beneath the surface. Your natural daily rhythm of cortisol is supposed to peak in the morning and hit its lowest point right around midnight. But with chronic stress, you develop dangerously elevated evening and midnight cortisol levels. This doesn't just wreck your sleep. Studies show elevated midnight cortisol is a major risk factor for bone density loss and osteoporosis in older adults. On top of that, it directly triggers increased visceral adiposity, which is really just the clinical term for dangerous belly fat. Section 3, the cardiovascular cascade, the scene of the crime. Now, here's where things get really serious. It is crucial to understand exactly how this chronic cortisol elevation attacks the aging cardiovascular system. Sustained cortisol triggers what we call metabolic syndrome. It's an absolute cardiovascular nightmare. It essentially shifts your body's resource allocation into a totally destructive state. It causes central obesity, packing visceral fat tightly around your internal organs. It triggers hyperglycemia, or increased blood sugar, through a liver process called gluconeogenesis. And this is wild. This is where your body literally breaks down your own muscle tissue into amino acids just to synthesize glucose for energy you don't even need. Furthermore, it causes dyslipidemia, actively driving up your bad LDL cholesterol while simultaneously lowering your good HDL cholesterol. Taking a look at the direct impact on your blood pressure, there's a quote from the medical literature that might sound a bit dense, but it is profoundly important. It reads, "Glucocorticoids inhibit the endothelial nitric oxide system." To put it simply, nitric oxide is the chemical that tells your blood vessels to relax and open up. This quote reveals that excess cortisol severely suppresses your blood vessels' ability to relax. Your vessels become stiff, they become rigid, acting as a direct mechanical driver of high blood pressure, completely independent of whatever you might be eating. So this all builds into a perfect storm. First, as we just saw, blood vessel inhibition leads straight to hypertension. Next, chronic cortisol overloads specific enzymes in your kidneys. This causes them to inappropriately retain sodium and water, which forcefully expands your blood volume. Third, it actually upregulates receptors that make your blood vessels extremely sensitive to adrenaline, causing them to tightly constrict. And finally, because chronic cortisol impairs your natural immune response, you're left with sustained low-grade inflammation. That inflammation accelerates atherosclerosis, the buildup of plaque right in your arteries. For adults over 50, this exact biological sequence drastically elevates the risk of experiencing a major event, like a heart attack or stroke. Section 4. Protecting your heart. Evidence-based interventions. But look, it's not all doom and gloom. When you think about the chronic stress of modern life, working late, balancing a family, finances, your health, it's heavy. And honestly, those pressures never really disappear. They just evolve as we age. We can't eliminate the modern world, which means we need practical, everyday solutions to actively lower our cortisol and give our cardiovascular machinery a much-needed break. The good news is the source data highlights key actionable steps that are incredibly effective for adults over 50. Step 1, prioritize sleep. This is non-negotiable. Sleep is the only time your brain can unpack the day's stressors and truly reset the HPA axis, restoring that natural morning-to-night cortisol rhythm. Step 2, get moving, specifically with things like Tai Chi. A study published in the Journals of Gerontology found that Tai Chi specifically helps older adults reduce stressful feelings and increase positive emotions, effectively breaking that chronic vigilance loop. Step 3, nutritional support. A diet rich in omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin C, and B vitamins gives your adrenal glands the exact building blocks they need to function healthily without remaining inflamed. And step 4, medical support. Seriously, don't let pride stop you from consulting a professional if your stress feels unmanageable. Sometimes medical intervention is exactly what's necessary to reset the biological clock. We've seen just how powerful cortisol is. It can literally remodel your cardiovascular system from the inside out. But we also know that through sleep, targeted nutrition, and mindful movement, you have the absolute power to push back. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to ponder. What is just one stressor you can take control of today to protect your aging heart for tomorrow? Pick just one thing and start there. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.